Hi, I'm Pat-Keon, a research analyst here with Lipper, and I'm here to speak to you about fund flows for the week ended Wednesday, July 16th. For the week, we had overall net outflows of approximately $2.6 billion. This reverses a 3-week trend where we saw positive net inflows. In market activity, the Dow Jones Industrial Average finished the week up 0.9%. The Dow closed the week at 17,138.2, which represented a record high close. This was the Dow's 15th record high close for the year to date. Driving the Dow's performance last week was the corporate earnings season. We saw better than expected results from 3 financial heavyweights. JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, and Citigroup all announced better than expected results. What was interesting about Citigroup's was it was announced in conjunction with the settlement, with their settlement with the U.S. Justice Department about their questionable mortgage-backed securities practices prior to the 2008 financial crash, which resulted in a $7 billion fine for Citigroup. Let's move on to our macro categories now. We saw equity mutual funds had net outflows of $70 million for the week. Taxable bond funds took in $2.6 billion. Muni bond funds had positive net flows of $114 million, while money market funds had $9 billion leave their coffers. Taking a closer look at equity funds now, as mentioned prior, they had $70 million in outflows for the week. This marks 2 out of the last 3 weeks where they had net outflows. This comes on the heels of starting the year with 25 consecutive weeks of positive net inflows. Breaking out the group a little further, we see that non-domestic equity again led the way, taking in about $600 million, while domestic equity funds had $700 million leave their coffers. Switching now to our equity ETF categories. Equity ETFs had $4.4 billion in positive net inflows for the week. The lion's share the lion's share of which was taken in by the Spider S&P 500 ETF, or SPY. SPY had $4.1 billion in positive net flows for the week. SPY has been on quite a run lately. Over the last 8 weeks, they've taken in over $15 billion. This $15 billion in net inflows accounts for over 51% of all the positive net inflows we've seen in the equity ETF category for that time period. It also marks a reversal in investor sentiment towards SPY, as prior to that, they had some serious net outflows going on. As even with this 8-week run, they still have net outflows of over $15 billion for the year to date. Moving on to our taxable bond fund categories now. As mentioned prior, they took in $2.6 billion for the week, which marked their 28th consecutive week of positive net inflows for the year. Once again, investment-grade debt led the way, as we see that our core bond and core bond plus fund categories took in $400 million and $300 million respectively. Let's move on to our taxable bond ETF categories now. For the week, they had $588 million leave their coffers. The biggest outflows were seen in the high-yield products, as we saw HYS, the PIMCO 0 to 5-year high yield, HYG, the iShares iBox high yield, and JNK, the Spider Barclays high yield, had net outflows of $520 million, $390 million, and $240 million respectively. Moving on now to our muni bond fund categories. As mentioned previously, they took in $114 million on the week, which is a somewhat muted performance, but it does come on the heels of last week where they saw $800 million leave their coffers. Leading the way there was the national muni categories, which had over $200 million in net inflows. Let's move on to our last category now, money market funds. Money markets had $9 billion leave last week. This reverses a 3-week trend in which they took in over $25 billion. The chief culprit this week was taxable money markets, which had $8.5 billion leave their coffers. Well, that wraps up this week's report. If you'd like to take a deeper dive and learn a little bit more, please join us at our website, www.lipperusfundflows.com. Please also join us here again next week, where another analyst from Lipper will be discussing that week's activity and fund flows.